Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Why We Fight Activism in the Japanese American Community. My name is Hallie Souza, and I am one of the organizers for this event. I'm joined today by Kylie, Kiana, and Katie, and we are all members of the JACL NCWNP Youth Board, a coalition of young students and professionals in the NCWNP district of the JACL. Our objective today is to highlight the activism that is being done within our community for all marginalized groups and how people can get involved. Today's event will consist of a panel followed by a Q&A session. We kindly ask that the audience keeps themselves muted until the Q&A session, after which they can put their questions in the chat or raise their hands and be called on. This event is being recorded and will be posted online, so those who do not wish to be pictured are welcome to turn off their cameras. I am pleased to now welcome our two speakers, Susan and Robin from San Jose Nikkei Resistors, and I will pass it off to them in just a short moment. Let me pin them to the screen. And if you could please introduce yourselves.
I guess I'll start. I'm Susan Hayase. I'm a Sansei. My parents and grandparents were incarcerated in Gila River, Arizona, and Amachi, Colorado. I was born on the East Coast because that's where my parents were after camp, but I was mostly raised in Southern California. I was involved in the redress reparations movement in San Jose in the late 70s through the early 90s, and I went to Stanford University in the late 70s, and I was an engineer for 34 years in Silicon Valley. I'm one of the co-founders of the San Jose Nikkei Resistors. I've been married for 40 years to somebody I met in the redress reparations movement, and we have two adult sons who live in San Jose.
Hi, everybody. My name is Robin Gopa Win. I am Shinise. My dad immigrated from Japan when he was like 17, 18. And then I grew up in Sunnyvale, and I've been living in San Jose for I don't know how long. But I have been pretty active in a lot of different organizations, but I really did find my organizing home at San Jose Nikkei Resistors. So me and Susan have been working together for some years now, through two different Trump administrations, unfortunately. Yeah, we're just getting started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will now pass it off to Kiana to begin the panel.
Hi everyone, I'm Kiana and I'm going to kick off the panel by asking Susan and Robin a couple questions, and after that we'll open up to the rest of you. Susan and Robin, your first question is, what are your personal motivations for getting involved in advocacy work?
I guess I'll start. So in a nutshell, but when you get older, your life is kind of a really big nutshell. Well, when I was a little kid, Japanese American identity did not really exist. And so who I am today grew out of fighting to make sense of the world and figure out who I was. I grew up mainly in an all-white, conservative suburb, and I remember having to defend my American citizenship when I was a kid, and I saw my parents being treated with disrespect. But a story I have about my mother really influenced me a lot, and guides me and motivates me a lot. So my mother was very shy and reserved. She'd been a high school senior when she was incarcerated at Gila. But I remember seeing my little 4'11", soft-spoken Nisei mother chase away a big gang of kids that was swarming around this one-legged veteran on crutches when I was 7 years old. And she came back into the house and her eyes were red and she was really angry. And she said with a lot of emotion to us kids, she said, "I don't ever want to see you do that to anyone." And to me, this was very shocking because I didn't totally understand it. But what I got out of that for the rest of my life was that sometimes you have to do something even if you're scared. And that was a very formative thing. I also read Mina Okubo's Citizen 13660 when I was 8 years old, and it's essentially a graphic novel about Tanfrin and Topaz. And it took me a while to figure it out, but I finally understood that my parents had been in this prison camp. And I went to school and I hung around after third grade because I wanted to tell my teacher. And she was cleaning the chalkboard, and I told her that, and she didn't even look at me. She just said, "That didn't happen." And so that was a very formative experience for me. I knew that my life was abnormal. There were these secret things about my family that most people didn't know. I also knew that it was abnormal because I didn't know people like myself. And it took me several years in college before I was able to make my way over across campus to the Asian American Students Association at Stanford. So I was working as an engineer in Silicon Valley, and that's kind of a whole story in itself because it was very racist and sexist uh, work environment. But I went, thank goodness, I went to the 1979 Tule Lake pilgrimage. And this was really different from modern pilgrimages. We slept on the floor in the county fairgrounds. We all helped cook and clean up and do security. But they were talking about redress. And, I thought of myself as someone who knew a lot about civics and the Constitution, but I was just astounded that you could pursue justice like that. And I wanted more than anything else to be a part of that movement that would acknowledge the camps and would pay back my parents some respect and give me back something that I felt was missing in my life. And I also felt very strongly that I wanted to change society. I wanted to fight racism, which I knew was very intertwined with my life. And I didn't want to sit on the sidelines. So those are kind of in a nutshell some of the things that have motivated me.
I also feel like I had a calling to social justice very early on when I was little. When I got to Berkeley, I knew right away that I wanted to study ethnic studies, and that was for me, very foundational. I was really lucky to come across some amazing mentors at Berkeley, like June Jordan and Lonnie Ding, and who were both professors, and then Grace Shimizu, who was a grassroots organizer working on the Japanese Latin American redress movement. And I'm also very lucky to have Susan as a mentor today. I feel like just personally, I was very motivated. I'm very motivated by empathy, feeling like I want to stand with the most vulnerable. But I also I'm very much like an optimist. So I'm very motivated by hope and feeling like, things are so difficult right now, but I do have hope that we're going to get through it. Which I think also is it also goes hand in hand with the fact that I'm a parent. So I feel like that's very motivational for me because, I see my kids and it makes me look past my own life to what we're working towards. It's not something that, is going to end with us. It's something that's going to get carried on. So that really motivates me as well. And of course, I'm also extremely motivated by the Japanese American community, which I think has faced so many everybody in the Japanese American community has faced unique challenges and histories. And it makes me really proud. I feel really proud of my dad's immigration story. And I know that it's unique in the Japanese American community, but I think that everybody has their own story and it all kind of combines into a beautiful tapestry, and that makes us really strong because of our diversity.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. So, the next question for Susan, why did you create the San Jose Nikkei Resistors, and what did you feel was missing in the JA social justice space?
Oh, oops, you're muted.
Okay. Thank you for this question. So what was missing was a grassroots political organization that was based in the local community. And so what does that mean? And how did I figure that out? How did I come across this thing? So I do have to talk about stuff that I learned when I was younger. So when I was 23, when I started working in the grassroots redress reparations movement. And some of my comrades were slightly older and had experience fighting back against things like the physical destruction of San Francisco, Japantown, and the physical destruction of Little Tokyo. And together, we formed the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations, the NCRR, because at that time, that's what was missing from the movement was a grassroots political organization for working people in the local communities. So I learned at that time that a lot of people then were not willing to work with the JCL, partly because of the history of the camps, but that there was a lot of fighting spirit among Japanese American people, specifically among working people, among people who aren't recognized as community leaders, but people who contribute to, the life of the community in all different ways. Um, so doing that kind of work was leadership training by figuring out what the problems were and how to overcome them. There were no junior members. Young Sansei and older Nisei were in the leadership of the NCRR, and which was different because in other organizations there was kind of an age hierarchy. So that's something I learned. So that kind of goes into my judgment about, why did I want to form SJNR? So another thing is that one of the NCRR's principles of unity was to support the struggles of other oppressed peoples. We weren't just there fighting for ourselves, but we were fighting to make sure it didn't happen to anybody else. And we also felt that we were part of this broad struggle for justice and for especially for racial justice. And so at the same time that we were fighting for redress, that we were building this movement, we were also in the Rainbow Coalition. We struggled for immigrants' rights. We supported other organizations organizing. We organized against police killing, and we organized as part of the Jesse Jackson campaign and the Rainbow Coalition. So, part of this grassroots organizing led to, we have to always assess the conditions. So like 2015, the writing was on the wall. Actually, that was like a time when Republican politicians were starting to en masse talk about the incarceration of Japanese Americans as a template for how to deal with Syrian refugees. And that was just astounding. And so like many of the organizations in San Jose, Japantown, we got together and we organized an anti-hate, program. And we brought together all the civic-minded organizations, the JCL chapters, Nihonmachi Outreach Committee, the ACLU was involved. And we were, my husband and myself, we were talking to a lot of our redress reparations friends, and we were uniting against Trump. We were trying to build a movement and trying to figure out what could people do. And so one of the things we did was we developed this Unity Pledge project. We started going to demonstrations and trying to bring people with us. And we also looked at, where are people at in the community? Where are they at mentally and politically? And we knew that there were unaddressed contradictions, like, for instance, like, could Japanese Americans support Latinos, right? We knew that there were these contradictions in the community between Japanese American farmers and the UFW, right? So we started to try to break down those kind of barriers. We worked with the Japanese American Museum of San Jose on a series of programs we called Don't Exclude Us. We explored the parallels between the JA camp history and the Mexican repatriation of the 1930s, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Muslim ban. And basically, we decided that there was a lot of momentum, and we decided that we were going to form an organization. And so that's when we formed San Jose Nikkei Resistors in 2018.
Thank you. So the next question is for Robin. Why is it important for Japanese Americans to get involved in activism, especially now?
Well, I would answer that there's always work to do, right? But this current moment, we're seeing the worst of our country. It's just coming out of the woodwork. It's out loud, it's open, and it's something that we have to fight. Because if we remain silent, we're complicit in all of this. I think that the Enemy Alien Act, the use of the Enemy Alien Act is a perfect example of this. They're building detention centers just like they built incarceration camps. They're separating families just as they did. They're using national origin and even ideology in the case of students, activists who have been detained. and those are the only reasons that they're snatching people off the streets and sending them to Louisiana or El Salvador, with no due process. So it's dire times. It's something that we do need to fight. And I just also want to remind us all that, if there's no due process for non-citizens, if there's not due process for visa holders and green card holders, that means that there's no due process for citizens, because something can happen to you, somebody can violate your rights, and there's no method to prove that you are a citizen. You're completely vulnerable. And I think that Japanese Americans have always had a place in these social justice movements throughout American history. And today is no difference. Whenever there's been injustice, there's been somebody to stand up and say that it's wrong. And there's always been groups of people who've come together to try to work and find solutions. I think of like Yuri Kochiyama, I think of the redress movements, and those are beautiful examples probably my favorite examples of these kind of folks. But there's so many unsung heroes and groups that have existed in the past. So I feel like we're really lucky to have organizations like like Densho, like the independent newspapers, like Beachy Bay. And in San Jose, we have JAMS, the museum. And I think that they do incredible work of maintaining this history of researching and highlighting the work that people have done.
The next question is for Susan. Could you talk about the importance of language when navigating the advocacy space?
Sure. So this is something I'm really interested in. So it's easy to take terminology for granted to the point that it becomes jargon, it becomes boring, right? We all think we all mean the same thing, but that might actually not be the case. Also, we can get lazy and fail to keep reflecting on what we're doing because we use the same words all the time. And I think sometimes we don't remember that words can actually influence how we think without our knowing it. And so I don't like to get into a rut and use the same words over and over again. I'm not saying never use certain words. There's no need for a dogmatic approach, but it's just important to be thoughtful and to grasp that we often have to explain things beyond labels, right? Because we're always meeting new people and people are coming from all different places. So one of the words that I have two examples. So one word is ally and allyship. And I tend not to use that. I know that's very commonly used. But I think that a lot of times it's used to describe ourselves. It's like I'm an ally. And I think it's kind of like a state of being, or it's my intentions, or it's my political feelings. Like it's supposed to mean that I'm taking a political stand to have solidarity with other people. But personally, I think that it should be about what you're doing, not what's in your head. I think it's up to the other group to decide whether they think you're an ally. You could go to a group, like if I were to go to the NAACP and say, hey, I'm an ally, they may kind of be polite to me, but they might, think, who's that? You know what I mean? Like, so I think that allyship is kind of an aspirational thing, but it's not an identity. So that's one thing. So the other word that I think a lot about is the word activist. So I use the word activist, and it's kind of shorthand for a lot of stuff. But there are real weaknesses with using that word, though, that I think could create barriers to people getting involved. So if you say the word activist, she's an activist, he's an activist, let's all be activists, I think it kind of makes it seem like a job with job requirements and eligibility criteria. And this is actually kind of disempowering for regular people. And, things that activists do, everybody can do that. Everybody can do that. Even public speaking, everybody can learn how to do it. And in grassroots organizing, the positive part of that is that you learn how to do it together. So for example, so I do a lot of public speaking, but I didn't used to. I mean, I'm that person. I never said anything in college I never said anything in class or discussion groups. I didn't say anything. I knew I had something to say because my heart would start beating like crazy and I'd get all nervous because I wondered if I was going to say something, but I didn't. I didn't say it. Um, but when I discovered the redress movement, and I knew that I wanted to be part of it. I knew that I kind of had to change. I knew that I had to, if I really wanted to fight, I had to be able to say something. So actually, I was working as an engineer at Hewlett Packard, and I signed up for this workshop on how to give a presentation, and everybody else was giving a presentation on their project. But I gave a presentation on the incarceration of Japanese Americans. I don't really know what other people thought, but I felt like I had to change. So in other words, I think activist, that's an okay word to use, but just remember that it's not a job. It's not an identity, and there's no requirements for it. So,
Thank you. So our next question is for Robin, and it is, what are there any challenges in this work that are unique to our community and culture?
Sorry, my kids. I totally agree with Susan. Yeah, we're all activists in our own ways and at different levels for sure. And we're all on our own paths. I love that. Sorry, to answer your question, one thing that comes to mind when I think about challenges is the model minority myth, or as we've been calling it, the model minority strategy. Um, and it's definitely a challenge. It's definitely a tool that's used to divide our communities, uh, divide us from other communities, divide us from each other, internalize this idea. And it's used in order to weaken us, right? To make us in a position of exploitation and control. It's like the classic divide and conquer strategy, which is probably their strongest tool. But I think that that also means that working in solidarity with other groups and rejecting the model minority myth because it is internalized, I think that that is our strongest tool also. Because when we celebrate the diversity of our community, of our Japanese American community, sorry. um, it's our greatest strength, and I think that it's the best shot that we have to take back our country. Um, and I think that also with many other communities of color, we have intergenerational trauma that is passed on from generation to generation. And I think that a lot of it had to do with survival. People are surviving the best they can. And so they pass down things that maybe are not the healthiest, but were necessary to make it and to keep living, right? So I think that there's an opportunity for intergenerational healing, which a lot of people who are, parents are thinking about, passing that down to our kids. But I also would like to just challenge the premise of the question also, because I also think that one of the question could have been posed like, what are our strengths? What are the things that we have in the Japanese American community that we bring to this work specifically that we excel at, that makes us stronger. And I think that there's a lot of those too. So, we're very organized, we're very nurturing, we want to protect our culture. I love how people in Japanese American community, I'm second generation, but people who are fourth, fifth generation, have mochizukis in their backyard, do obon odori in their backyard, have tamabata trees and put up wishes. We cherish our culture, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. And I also think that we have we have amazing potlucks, which I think is our secret weapon for organizing, especially, in San Jose Nikura Sisters, for example. We love to throw potlucks. I think it's an amazing way to bring people together. And as Susan was talking about, we're all activists. We're all at our different, places on our journey. potlucks really bring together all these different people, not just people who are kind of like ready to go, ready to do a direct action. We're talking about people from the community who are maybe questioning themselves or their like what their ideas are, or you know, maybe they have a strong commitment to social justice, but don't know how to, have outlets, don't know what to do. So these kind of things, these kind of gatherings where we break bread together, where we all bring something to share, it's very important in the organizing work. And yeah, I think that for building that kind of relationships with other people, and we're developing our skills together, as Susan was talking about too. I mean, that makes us strong as a community, and it allows us to be sustainable for the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think that from my own experience that Japanese potlucks are always the best. Um, so for Susan, my question to you is, what have been some of the impacts from your advocacy work that has been made?
You. So I think I want to start by saying that, nothing I've ever done has been just me all by myself. I've worked with uh, uh, organizations and across organizations and with different groupings of people, and I've been part of movements. And so I have to view things that I think of as accomplishments in the context of, my place in time. Like, so I think of myself as starting as part of the tail end of the long 60s. So I came to adulthood in the late 70s, and the redress and reparations movement was how I got started. And being part of the organizational lineage of the NCRR and the ongoing legacy of that work is something that I feel I've been a part of that, and that's had a big impact on the Japanese American community and politics and history. And but also being part of that time was the beginnings of the backlash against the gains of the 60s and 70s. So so one of the things that has always been ever present in my mind that I've tried to integrate it into the work that I've done is to keep the Japanese American community from drifting to the right. Okay, and to make sure that people remember history and don't let this be erased. Like, don't let the progressive history of the Issei, don't let the progressive history of the Nisei or the Sansei be erased. So, another accomplishment, I think, or effect, I think that kind of like uh, piggybacking on what Robin said about the model minority strategy, I think that we've been able to develop our understanding of that, because that is not just something that's outside of ourselves. Like, here we are in this community that's trying to assimilate us and erase our culture and our history and our identity. And sometimes when we do a campaign, we have to really question ourselves, like, what are we saying? Like, are we saying something that's, like, oh, we're kind of special, we're Japanese Americans are so special, and that's part of the model minority strategy. So we have to constantly question, like, how we express our ideas, right? And we don't want to succumb to these narratives. So uh, and also to recognize that this is in society, right? Like, if you ever read an article about Japanese Americans or about Japanese Americans having solidarity with it, read the comments and you will see the model minority strategy in action. Like, people will go, oh, I really, Japanese Americans, they were in camp, but what a lovely people, and, they were so deserving. And I mean, there's that kind of thing. But then there's also people who want to tell you that there's something innately anti-Black about Asians or innately anti-Asian about Blacks. And, these are ideas that are in society. And so we have to be very aware of that. Another thing I think that I feel proud of being part of is that through the Nihon Machi Outreach Committee and the NCRR and the San Jose Nikkei Resistors is demonstrating that professional nonprofit advocacy is not the only opportunity or option for Japanese American political organizing, that there's the opportunity to do progressive organizing in the community, the grassroots level with working people. Also, one of the things that I'm very proud of to have been a part of is having played a role in changing the narrative of the San Jose Japantown community. So, through a project that my husband and I initiated called Hidden Histories of San Jose Japantown, which is an augmented reality art project, but we really highlighted the long-standing work of historian Connie Young Yu, who is a descendant of Heinleinville, Chinatown, which was the kind of the origin hub of what eventually became San Jose Japantown, and the longstanding historical memory and work of Robert Ragsack, who is the historian of San Jose Pinoy Town, which is right on 6th Street. And so anyway, so this has become something that has been unerased, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm also really proud that San Jose Nikkei Resistors were part of the first modern period wave of Japanese American support for HR 40 and reparations for slavery. And that this, was very enthusiastically picked up by many people, probably mostly all at about the same time. But we feel very proud of that. And that comes from the NCRR lineage and the NCRR legacy work that we've done. So, yeah, anyway.
Thank you. So, Robin, our next question's for you. How can people get more involved, whether they're local to the Bay Area or elsewhere?
I think, a lot of people in this who are in the audience are already in a group. If you're not in a group, I say join a group. Come join San Jose Nikkei Sisters. We'd love to have you. Sorry about that. If you are in an organization, join the Neighbors Not Enemies Coalition, which is being formed in San Jose Japantown, but also, other Japantowns, other areas are doing something similar. If you're in a group, talk about what's going on, brainstorm what you can do, come up with action items, write postcards together, call your elected officials together. One of my favorite things that we do together in San Jose Nikkei Sisters in our general meetings is, if there's something going on, we'll just take a moment, we'll take a break from our meeting, and we'll all just go on our cell phones and start calling and leaving messages, because we're usually meeting in the evening. And then, if you have a chance, meet with your elected officials. They want to hear from you, especially if you're an active group and if the elected official in question is a believer of democracy, which unfortunately isn't everybody right now. And if you are at all inclined, enter local politics. You can help candidates who are already running by going and helping their campaigns, go door knocking. Me and my daughter have been doing a couple different door knocking campaigns for our local candidates, and it's been a really nice bonding moment. She wants to come say hi. But it's also, I think, really good because, I think it's teaching her that this is something that she could do, right? She can, do door knock for her own campaign. She doesn't have to feel like the imposter syndrome. She can feel like this is something that is reachable and attainable. But it's also a good way to just get to know other folks, right? We also in San Jose Nikkei Resistors, we work with a lot of different groups, different organizations, and just different communities outside the Japanese American community. Recently, we hosted the Rapid Response Network, and it was very well attended. We had over 125 attendees, and most of the participants signed up to help with rapid response. But if you have rapid response in your area, help them out. It's really important to have people on the ground when ICE is coming into communities unannounced and unmarked vehicles. So, yeah, those are some things.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Robin said, and I just want to just jump in just quickly, because I think it's like be a part of your community, your Japanese American community, but also be a part of the broader community. You know, it's not a specialized thing to be a Japanese American. We're humans and we're part of the community, and we live with all these different kinds of people. And so in San Jose, our Neighbors Not Enemies coalition is forming around Japantown because multi-ethnic and multiracial Japantown, we want to make that really strong. And then we're going to expand it. And we're going to do projects like lobbying to overturn the Alien Enemies Act. So there's a lot of things that you could do with us. We're developing talking points. We're developing how to help people understand how to be part of a coalition, which a lot of people are not used to doing that. Um, so anyway, and also this is a way to vanquish or address issues of community trauma because community trauma isn't just individual or familial. So one of the things that I think is community trauma is people aren't used to discussing issues in the community, inside their organizations sometimes, but also between organizations, and aren't used to having and living with disagreements or having a political independence. So in the process of doing things like building these coalitions, you can help heal community trauma. So anyway.
You. So, Susan, where would be good places to get informed on social issues?
Let's see. Okay, so I think this is a good question, and I've been told from various people of all ages, actually, that people don't think that they know enough to be politically active. People feel like you have to be, a professor. You have to know all this history. You have to know all this stuff. But, everybody feels like that, actually. And I think that there are things about the way politics is now, there's all these imaginary debates with people on the internet. So I think there's this thing that people feel like you have to know all these factoids and stuff. So I'd say come to a meeting and get informed together with other people. And if you are in an organization, get your organization to start thinking about being a learning organization, like have that be an activity of the organization. So, so me personally, I read mainstream media, but I also read alternative media. I also try to verify things that I read or see. I read critiques of different things. Actually, this is, you Google, something, but then Google critique of something or Google debunk something, right? And you get a lot of information, ask critical questions. But I think the best thing is to bring that to an organization that has different age groups and different kinds of people in it who can help hash this out and help develop a better, more full view of the issue. So, like for instance, in San Jose Nikkei Resistors in 2020, some new members got together and they prepared a presentation on abolition. And that really shaped our thinking and our work in the community. That was extremely valuable. It expanded everybody's minds. Okay. And right now, I've just recently asked one of our SJNR members to whether she would be willing to present a discussion on techno-fascism, which is a new way of looking at some of the politics of what's happening now, especially what's happening with Doge. So, so this is, we should never think that we don't know enough. We learn as we go and we learn together. And it's not just, out of a book or somebody's brain, but it's like we all observe things and we all process it through our experience. And so we got to get together and talk about it. Yeah.
Thank you. So, our last question is for Robin. What advice would you give to someone just starting their activism journey?
I think that most importantly, my advice would be prioritize rest and prioritize joy. Because there's going to be there's so much pain and suffering that we're going to see. We're going to be working to stop. And we can't afford to lose people to burn out. I mean, it's a natural thing that happens with this work, but if you really, intentionally rest, intentionally, make sure that you're finding joy with each other and by yourself, with your family, anywhere you can find it. Because this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We need to be able to keep on keeping on. I also would say to, find your people who lift you up. If competitiveness is not your thing, which maybe I'm just speaking for myself, prioritize that when you're looking for a group of people, or, find the people who, make you feel like inspired. Those are the folks that you're going to want to work with. But also, I love what Susan was talking about too, is that you want to have a group with lots of different perspectives, lots of different ages, lots of different generations, lots of different ideologies, because that's also very strengthening. So having a group like that, having guidelines to kind of, guide the process, having values written down, things that you can kind of refer back to, it's really helpful. We've talked a lot at San Jose Negri Sisters about how we navigate disagreements, how we do conflict resolution, because these things are bound to happen with this work, because a lot of people feel very passionately. So we do want to take care of each other. We want to, make sure that we're, you know, being kind and, we're like supporting each other, because we really do need to, we need to lean on each other, to get through this. We're all just human. We're all just doing our best. It's especially good to remember that if you're being hard on yourself, right? Because, we're doing as much as we can, and we're facing huge obstacles. So doing what you can is huge, and just like coming here today is huge. So it's been really nice to just chat about all this for the last, 45 minutes.
Amazing. Thank you, Kiana, for leading the panel. I'm now going to highlight Kylie, who will be moderating the Q&A. So audience members, if you have any questions for Susan, Robin, or both, please feel free to either put them in the chat or raise your hand and Kylie can call on you.
I see a question from Gail.
Hi, this was so excellent. Thank you so much to the panel. I'm Gail Yamamoto Seymour. I'm with the Sonoma County JACL chapter, and I'm the chair of the Civil Rights Committee. I'm also on the district Civil Rights Committee. And then I'm also the chair of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the local NAACP. And one thing that this talk today has inspired me to do is to bring the two organizations together. I mean, I move information back and forth, but there is definitely a disconnect. I think all of our organizations are segregated, whereas everyone's doing their own thing. And I don't believe with the local NAACP that there are any Asian members besides myself. And with the local JCL, we do have one board member who is Black and Japanese, and of that ancestry, but I don't believe there are any Black members. And the model minority issue, I think, has come into play with that. So there is that separation. And I was looking for ideas of how I could bring people together, bring the organizations together. Should we start with something social, or any ideas?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on your assessment of your local situation, right? Because I think it kind of depends on how your local JCL chapter operates and how the local NAACP chapter operates. I think, and then what's the surrounding political environment? Like for example, in Santa Clara County, there is a lot of siloing, like of different ethnic organizations, but the there are also coalitions, like I mentioned that I'm part where I'm representing San Jose Nikkei Resistors in the Coalition for Justice and Accountability. And in that coalition, I work with members of the NAACP and Silicon Valley Debug and
Mm.
Asian Law Alliance and different organizations. So I've talked to the president of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP and uh, broached the topic of let's talk about Black and Asian American relationships. So in Santa Clara County, I think there's about 600,000 Asian Americans, and that's like 40% of the population. Japanese Americans are 4% of the Asian Americans.
Mm.
So we're 1.6% of the entire county. And the Black community is actually a little bit larger than the Japanese American community, but not much larger, right? And so anyway, I think there's like local conditions that look at your local conditions and figure out where where people might be at, where people are thinking or what people are thinking. Like for instance, we've recently had some really terrible Asian American elected officials who were talking nice in public, but disseminating very racist, anti-Black, anti-Latino messages in Chinese,
Oh,
like
wow.
a newsletter, right? So uh, there are, there are local conditions political conditions that you should look at and talk to people about and try to figure out where people are at and proceed from there. So I think it's kind of like always investigate, and try to understand what's going on and what's the context and stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I would also add that, I mean, I think that your instinct to do something social is a good one. If there's also any projects that you could work on together, like, a protest or a press conference or, a book launch or something like that, where you're organizing together, any opportunity at all, that would be a good way to, start to work together. I think of some organizations in San Jose, Japantown, they volunteer for each other's events a lot, like for DOR, the
Oh,
Japantown Lions will come and help them set up all the chairs. And then when the Japantown Lions have, their yearly island brunch, knock folks will come and help barbecue. So yeah, if there's opportunities for people to help each other, you need just manpower, invite the other group to come and help.
Thank you, Gail.
thank
That
you.
was it.
My
Yeah,
dog's barking, so I'm going to mute.
thank you, Gail. That was a great question, and thank you both for your answers. We've got a couple more questions in chat here, so I'll start with Kazuya's question. I see. I came to the US from Japan as an international student when I was 26. Now I'm living here as a US citizen. In Japan, we don't receive much education on this topic. Do you have any message for Japanese people living in the US or for in Japan?
I mean, on the topic of Japanese American political organizing, is that what you meant?
Kazuya, does that sound accurate to what you were intending with your question? Mm. Yes, it says yes.
Well, I'm kind of interested in this topic, so I've been trying to do some reading, and actually, it would be really interesting to talk to people who grew up in Japan and find out kind of what you know about uh, like Japanese immigrants, right? Like, why people leave Japan and stuff. But I'm kind of interested I know that there was a lot of political organizing by Issei who came, in the 1890s and 1900s and stuff. And actually it's been kind of continuous, although a lot of it is erased, a lot of it hasn't been written about or discussed much. It's kind of buried. So I think discovering some of this kind of thing could be something that Japanese immigrants who could read things written by Issei. This could be a real partnership between Japanese Americans and um, Japanese immigrants. But I think it's the same as for anything is come join a group and let's learn about things together. Because I think it would be great to hear what the specific questions are, like uh, what we're doing, and like ask questions as we go. Like, why are you doing that? Um, why are you making this statement? Or what's the meaning behind that? So I think um, it would be great to be in a working relationship, in other words. So please, if you're in San Jose, please come join us.
Robin, did you have any?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add, but I do like when I think about communicating with folks in Japan, I have a lot of family in Japan. I love to think about the Japanese diaspora and think about all the Japanese folks who are in other countries too. That doesn't really have anything to do with the question, but I do love to think about that because we're in a lot of places.
Awesome. Thank you both for your answers. Let's see. Our next question in chat is from Hallie. So Hallie wrote, many people, including myself, feel overwhelmed by the Trump administration's rapid attack on civil rights. Me too. What is the best strategy for JA activists to respond as a community?
That's a good question. And I think, so Robin talked about some, and I think that we're still trying to work this out. So one of the things that we've done to respond is to the San Jose Nikkei resistors. We initiated the Neighbors Not Enemies Coalition as a way to respond because we think that the issue of scapegoating immigrants and the denial of due process is something that, we know about from our historical experience, our family's experience, but also that it means so much to us. So we are, uh, that's something that we really want to do. So forming this coalition is a way to build community power and to have an influence on the debate, have an influence um, on how people think about it. We want to do public education so that other people can help resist the Alien Enemies Act, and so other people can help pass the repeal. We also think that doing this is a way to help train people how to do advocacy and how to do different kinds of organizing work. Um, so yeah, but like Robin said, we also are promoting the Rapid Response Network. We're trying to talk about, how can we be of use to like vulnerable immigrants in Japantown, right? There are people who work at the restaurants and the stores, and we want to make sure that people have uh, access to know your rights information. So those are some of the kinds of things that we want to do. And I think it's also really important to come out as a group, like so Japanese Americans are not confined to issues that uh, directly touch on our history. Like we're not confined to have an opinion on only things that are parallel to Japanese American history. So we, oppose what's happening with Doge. I mean, like I think, there's a member of our group who is actually several members who are downstream from the Doge cuts, and their jobs are in danger. And their jobs provide hugely important services and skills to the community and to the people. And so we feel that we should respond to those kinds of things too. And like, there's so much happening right now. I mean, it's just kind of overwhelming, but we're also concerned about moves towards authoritarianism in our local government. So our mayor of San Jose is proposing to jail people who are unhoused. And so this is like a move to the right. And this is part of why we're looking at techno-fascism, right? Because he's somebody that comes from circle. So anyway, there's no one thing. And I think, so that's another thing. Like I said, there's no one thing, right? There's, and Japanese American organizations should uh, have the political independence to do something, right? We don't all have to do exactly the same thing. We can uh, glom together in order to have major impact, but we don't have to all work in lockstep because we are different. I mean, some of our organizations in the Neighbors Not Enemies Coalition are already doing different kinds of things, like Asian Law Alliance serves immigrants, right? There are anyway, they're just different things that we all do, right? So, um, but we want to also come together and figure out how we can have some kind of collective impact too. So it's all things. We have to do everything.
That was a great answer. I have nothing else to add.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like, Susan, you kind of answered these other questions that we also got in chat. Um, oh, will the recording be available for others to view? Yes, it will be. Holly, do you want to talk a little bit about where it will be available?
Yes, it'll be posted on YouTube, and we will send out the link once it is ready.
Yeah. I think, Susan, you kind of answered a little bit two of the other questions we had in chat. One from Julie about like if there's one specific Trump admin issue that the community should take leadership on, and then the other about the goals of the Neighbors Not Enemies Act coalition and some of the activities planned. I guess if there was anything specifically either of you wanted to add for those two questions, even though I know we've touched on it a little bit before, but either of those questions.
Well, just one thing. I think so. We just made a presentation to the Silicon Valley. Is it Silicon Valley Young Democrats? And most of the members of that organization are young people of color. And they decided to endorse the Neighbors Not Enemies Act, which is the repeal of the Alien Enemies Act. And they want to work on a campaign with us to help get more Congress people and senators to sign on to that. So we're probably going to do things like that too. Yeah.
I don't have anything to add. Sorry.
All good, all good. All right, are there any other questions from anyone here? I see Gail again.
I just want to make a comment that I love Ro Khanna. Everything that I've heard from him seems to be right on. So I think in Silicon Valley area, I think it's great that you have him on your side.
All right. Any other questions? Again, you can put them in chat or you can raise your hand or unmute yourself as well. Hallie?
Yeah, I know you talked a lot about the importance of language and how that pertains to your work with other communities that are not your own. How do you recommend that Japanese Americans and perhaps Asian Americans as a whole navigate any lingering sense of distrust across different communities due to some unfortunate past histories of select individuals, particularly with like other BIPOC communities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think because of the model minority strategy, it's already been in play for several generations now. So it's had an impact, right? So we could be born yesterday and we're born into this situation where there's already, this distrust has been planted. I think that it's really important for us to make sure that we don't use language that's offensive to other people. Like, for instance, we don't try to paint ourselves as special. Like, I think that actually is part of the model minority camp story. paints us as special. Like, for instance, some people say, oh, the camp experience was like the worst thing that ever happened in the entire universe, right? So this is actually kind of offensive, right, to other people. And when if we said something like, "Oh, Japanese Americans are the best messengers to deliver some kind of message about immigrant rights because we were immigrants and our immigrant ancestors were scapegoated," I think that that's kind of offensive too. So I think that we have to really make sure that what we say and how we present ourselves does not convey the model minority message. Okay, so that's one thing. And then I think we have to show that we're actually doing the work. So one of the things that San Jose Nikkei Resistors through the Coalition for Justice and Accountability has been doing for a number of years. Right now, we're on this long struggle, kind of a two-pronged struggle. One is to stop the sheriff from using tasers in the jail. So, and on the street. So apparently Santa Clara County is the only county in California. I'm not sure if this is verified or not, but I've heard that it's the only county with the sheriff is not using tasers. So tasers are often touted as being de-escalation devices, but they're actually punishment devices for Black people and to be used on Black people and brown people. So we're involved in that campaign. We're actively involved in that. Also, there's a campaign to stop the use of police dogs in apprehension. So this is like using vicious dogs on people who are innocent before proven guilty. And it's usually used on Black people and brown people. So we're part of that campaign. We are actively involved in that campaign. So I think that, you have to show that you're not just all talk, you're actually doing something. So I think that that's really important. I think it's good not to, like, for instance, I know some people try to say, oh, well, Japanese Americans are kind of just innately, we have solidarity with everybody, but that's not true, and that's not convincing to people in the community, so we have to analyze our local community, what's going on here, where are people at, what is the political history of your community, and yeah, so I think that's really important to do.
I guess the only thing I would add to that, which is a great answer, is that one thing that I really love to do is just kind of recognize and highlight and celebrate the diversity within the Japanese American community. We all have our own things that we bring to the table. We all have our own pasts and strengths and histories, and I think that's true of all communities, right? So when you allow for those complexities to be shown and you celebrate them and you uplift them, I think that's really respectful, right? For other to be in community with other groups, with other folks who identify in a certain way or whatever. It's it's not just like a group and they're static and that's how they are and there's characters. It's every single person in that group brings something unique to the group. So and I think that that's one of the things that has been done to us from white supremacy, right? Like it's like, oh, you have to be a certain way because you are this person, right? You don't get the breadth of the community and all the different aspects that they don't all get to live at the same time, but they do. So respecting that and celebrating that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that understanding of the diversity of the community is really important in terms of building a strong community as a whole. I think we have time for maybe one more question if anyone, any of the attendees happen to have any last questions, but if not, oh, Thomas, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask them about how the Alien Enemy Act is helping Japanese Americans deal with this issue of promoting citizenship kind of above everything, because that was kind of one of the things from the camp experience. That was to show that we're loyal and we're citizens, majority. So how is that changing now? I mean, it seems like that's what I feel the Alien Enemies Act is helping us look at that differently. And I think it affects how we talk to current immigrants, including people from Japan too, as well as in part of the education.
Yeah, I think so. Um, I've seen online and I've talked to different people who are Japanese American who are, kind of Trump supporters. And they say that what's happening now to people being like the Venezuelans and the students who are being picked up, they say, oh, well, this has nothing to do with us because Japanese Americans were all citizens. Okay. So that's actually part of the model minority story is to write the Issei, the non-citizens, out of the story, right? Is like if your contention is that Japanese Americans are deserving of sympathy and respect because we're all citizens, then that's that's a truncated story. That's erasing the Issei. So the Alien Enemies Act and what's happening to people like Mahmoud Khalil and to all the other PhD students who are being grabbed off the street, that they're vulnerable because they're not citizens, right? And that's what happened to the first round of roundups, under the Alien Enemies Act. There were 30,000, 31,000 Japanese, Italians, and Germans picked up, and of those, 17,000, so more than half, were Japanese immigrants. And I think that you know, that's huge, right? And this incident is helping us to kind of grapple with that because and it's actually helping us educate our own community because there are a lot of I think there's a lot of sloppiness sometimes about how we pass down the story, right? Like I think sometimes we talk too much about what kind of food people had in camp or the dust in the camp. I mean, all those things are part of the story, but we should talk about, who were those people that got picked up by the FBI and why were they picked up? And what were the vulnerabilities like and what's our major complaint is like the failure to give due process. And everybody in this country deserves due process, whether you are a citizen, whether, whatever your status is. The Bill of Rights says persons, it doesn't say citizens, it says persons. And we don't want to live in a society where some people can be just grabbed off the street, right? We want to live in a country where everybody's rights are completely respected, and in a country where it's like rule of law, So I think the Alien Enemies Act is bringing these things to the forefront, and it's empowering us to talk about this again, and yeah. So I think it's an opportunity, for us all to relearn camp history in a different light. And we have to keep doing that, actually. It's really bad if you have this really stagnant, calcified thing that never changes. I mean, we have to keep relearning things. Even, sometimes we feel arrogant. I know all this stuff. I read this book. I know all this stuff. I've been saying this for 10 years, but I think we have to be humble and we have to keep relearning things. Yeah.
Robin, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
Sorry, I actually didn't even hear the question, but it's okay. That was a beautiful answer. I'm sorry that I logged off unexpectedly.
All good. I think just for sake of time, I will go ahead and pass it back to Hallie. I know we're cutting close to the end time here, but thank you all for your questions and thank you both for your amazing answers and your insight.
Hi, everyone. One last thing before we end the event. Thank you all for attending. I know it's a long weekend for some, so I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. This is some of our social media handles. We will be sending out a recap email sometime next week, depending on some technical things. Hopefully the recording will be ready by then as well. If not, we'll send out a second email with the recording. And the recap email will also feature some resources and ways to stay informed and get involved. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much to the organizers.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.